taking care of some off-camera business while the music plays. We'll get into it in just a second. Yeah, that's pretty good stuff. What in the shit is that? But let's do one more song and then we'll get into a couple things. I have a couple things today. It generally is when I am at work, because it gets in my face. But listen, I don't try to give people the vapors, but it's just the cross I bear, I guess. I got a new Nalgene. I'm excited about it. I'm going to show some pictures from my weekend before we get into other stuff, but I like this song. I guess in fairness, I have tried very hard for like 15 years, but it worked. I don't know. It's very strange to me. Like, I have an extremely, extremely critical view of my like physique, where it's developed, what I need to improve. But I was watching the new season of Taskmaster, which is really good. I love Taskmaster. But Joel Dommett on the show, he is like widely talked about in the UK as a super fit, sexy man. Like, people just like can't believe how fit this dude is. And there is a bit on the show where you see him with his shirt off, and I'm like, I mean, it looks like he's lifted weights, but he is a flabby man. And that's fine, right? It's not a but I am too hard on myself sometimes. But I have to be, lest I become arrogant. Taskmaster is fantastic. It is probably the funniest show on TV. There are 21 seasons, and they're all available on YouTube. Mostly British comedians, some Canadian comedians, but Jason Mantzoukas and Kumail Nanjiani have both been on. Kumail is on right now. He's on the current season. Jason was on a couple seasons ago. And then they've had other American and like Canadian comedians, but not people like, I didn't know who Desiree Birch was. She's an American, but I didn't recognize her. It is a fantastic show, and it is the perfect amount of family friendly, which is like they swear and stuff gets sexual, but it's never really like meant to be sexy or edgy, right? It's really, nobody is trying to be like controversial, you know, and they treat the crew really well. It just seems to be, everybody that's been on the show says it's the best thing they've done in their careers, basically, or the most fun, or the best they were treated on a show. Yeah, I highly endorse it. Like many people, we found it around COVID, and there were like 5 or 6 seasons that had been filmed at that point, maybe 7 or 8. So there was a bunch of content to go through. Bethany and I really like British comedy, and we watch a decent amount of like British panel shows. So we've watched a ton of 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown. We watched a ton of Would I Lie to You. I don't watch it as much anymore, but like Big Fat Quiz. And so we've gotten familiar with a lot of British comedians from the panel shows. So it's fun to see them on Taskmaster because we already have a sense of like why they're funny. James Acaster has done it. I'm trying to think of comedians that you would like recognize that have done it, but I mean it is mostly British comedians. John Richardson has done it. Sally Phillips has done it. Okay, well, let's look at some pictures from the hike. I don't know how good any of these are, really. David Mitchell, if you've ever heard of That Mitchell and Webb Look. Noel Fielding from The Mighty Boosh has been on. I'm trying to think of the other like high profile, because the thing is, a lot of their high profile comics are high profile in England because they were famous in the 90s, which does make them very famous, but not to an American audience at all. Okay, so I do know some of these are good. I know not all of them are. I haven't been able to really make up my mind on everything. But this was from Saturday. So I got up at 4:45, got my shower, made my coffee, hit the road, drove up Guanella Pass to basically the Mount Bierstadt trailhead. So Mount Bierstadt is a famous 14er in Colorado. It's one of the easier ones to do. Like as far as climbing a mountain goes, there are climbs where you're just hiking uphill, and there are climbs where you need an ice axe, right? So Mount Bierstadt, you are just walking basically the whole way. So it's a very approachable, very difficult hike for a lot of people who are trying to do 14ers. So everybody that drives up to this parking lot is going to do Mount Bierstadt. I was on this trail by myself for 5.5 hours. See, here's the great thing about shooting digital, is you just take several and then find out which ones are best. So I did this Mount Geneva hike, and Mount Geneva is 12,000 feet, 12,300 feet. Some of these I'm trying to show scale, and it's as anybody who has been to places like this knows, like just really beautiful places, you can't really capture it. You can take a really beautiful picture, and you might be able to get some really crisp details, and it's vivid, but it doesn't capture the experience of seeing it in person, because I don't know, our eyes it's just different when it's 3D, I guess. But what I'm trying to show here is, like, here's a mountain range, here's a mountain range, and then back here is another mountain range that I can see from the trail. So the first couple miles of trail is really flat. I believe this is Square Top Mountain. I got several pictures of Square Top Mountain, so for sure I will be able to identify it at some point. But like this, the feeling of being here is very difficult to capture. Yeah, this one's good. It feels like it's a little dark, maybe. Can I mark it up in? No. That's annoying. I edit fast and a little bit messy, but I know what I'm looking for. Yeah, that one's good. Yeah. I tell you what, I say this all the time. And look, I do think I'm a pretty decent photographer. I think I have a good eye for how to put a shot together. But you don't have to work very hard when you have this landscape. All you have to do is not move the camera while you're taking the picture, and you'll probably get something pretty good. I mean, look at that. So my favorite thing to do, this is my cheat, this is my trick, and it is not original to me. I'm hardly the first person to do it, but I do specifically try to funnel people's eyes to what I am trying to highlight. So usually something like this, I'm trying to get the edges, right? I want the edges to be higher than the point that I'm shooting at, or to create like a channel that you kind of are drawn towards, not necessarily the middle, but the point that I want to focus on. There's a picture I have. I had to zoom this way in. This is the only wildlife I saw on my actual hike. Okay, so we'll just leave it on this and let me tell the story, and then I'll go back to the photos. So Bethany, yeah, well, I'll get there. Bethany was in Arkansas for her sister's graduation from college, which we're all happy about. Shout out Alexis. She will probably come out and stay with us this summer. I think she double majored and has become a communist, but she's gonna go get her MBA. So that's very exciting, and it makes sense that Bethany went home for that. But what with plane tickets being the prices they are these days, there was no reason for me to go. Like, I like Alexis. I know Alexis. I would have been happy to be at her graduation, but there was no obligation on any side for me to be there. So I stayed here, and I thought what I will do is I'll do a hike that Bethany would not enjoy. Because I am not trying to force her to do any miserable hikes just to do them, no matter how pretty they are, with maybe a few exceptions, right? We might do a 14er together as a like rite of passage, but she doesn't like the cold and she doesn't like high winds. So, you know, I chose a alpine hike that's totally exposed and has no tree cover the entire way because I wanted to hike over 12,000 feet and kind of test myself. So this was the mountain that I chose, and it's fun because it's a summit. So you get to stand at the very top of a mountain, and there's just something about the male spirit that wants to stand on top of things. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just, you see a rock and you think, I bet I could get on top of that rock. And then you try to get on top of the rock. And it's not exclusive to men, but it is very male. It's innate. I don't know how to describe it. But anyway, so I'm going to do this hike. So I get up regular early. Colorado early is different than early in the regular world, because Colorado early is you're pulling into the parking lot at 6:30 and people are leaving, right? Because they got there at 2:30 and they put on their headlamps so that they could see the sunrise from the summit, not just while they were there. It's different out here. But I got up early for me, and I was out there about 7. I was by myself on the trail. It was snowy, which sucks because I didn't bring my waterproof shoes. I thought about it, and I didn't. So throughout the course of my hike, my shoes got progressively more waterlogged, and that was unpleasant. But it was 40 degrees, 45 degrees. It was a pretty easy hike for the most part. Chilly, but I was prepared for the fact that it would be cold. So I was properly layered and I was fine. I had coffee and some snacks with me. And I hiked to the peak and I took some pictures. And then I hiked back. And it was a really beautiful day. It was sunny the whole way. There was a little bit of, at the end when I was leaving, the clouds had kind of rolled in. But it was so beautiful. There are several pictures of me in here. We will not look at them all. But I like that one. Yeah, that one was good. That is Mount Square Top. They are shitty, cheap plastic sunglasses that I got at a gas station in Meade because I broke my other ones. And I just have not upgraded in the past 3 years. Because Bethany was not there, I brought a totem. This is Mount Square Top, and I do like this photo a lot. This one I have already favorited, so I know to mess with it. Mount Square Top, I am not good at the names of the mountains. I'm not good at geography at all, really. It's from an online joke. It's a bunny with a little frog from this web comic artist that makes really weird web comics that we like. Yeah, see, some of these you just don't get the It's very flat. Just not. This is a fine picture, but it is just fine. It's not very interesting. That's better. I've cropped this one already. I'm shooting from a pretty good distance, so a lot of ground gets in it, but I don't want to have like the big shelf of flat ground in front of the picture that I'm trying to show. So this is the better one, I think. But this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying I try to frame my shot with the edges, right? I've got these trees that I'm shooting between to kind of highlight this area. I have seen other photographers talk about doing that, so it's not my trick. But like, photography is not that hard if you know a few rules, and basically that's the difference between people who took one photography class in college and people who didn't, right? You learn stuff like the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is really, really simple, but it makes your pictures look good because you are drawing the eye to what you want the eye to be drawn to. So I saw a lot of evidence of animals on the hike, but the only animal I saw while I was hiking, which was about 5.5 hours round trip, I just saw that chipmunk. But on the drive up, I saw a herd of elk in like a meadow, and I saw 2 bighorn sheep on the side of the road, just like eating the salt from the side of the road. This is just the top of the hill I was climbing, a mountain, I guess, literally. This was like the final ascent of a couple hundred feet, and it sucked. I was already at 12,000 feet, so going up another, look, there's 12.2. Going up another few hundred feet it's rough. It looks steeper in person. I think that's Mount Bierstadt from the back. See, the rule of thirds. I don't know how much you know about photography. This is also slightly cut off. Let me see if I can shift this just a little bit. No. Let me get into OBS real quick. Let's see, where's the bottom of the frame? There we go. Okay. That's better. You can see the full what I'm trying to show you. I didn't know it was that low. Okay, so rule of thirds. Imagine there's a grid on this photo, like a tic-tac-toe board, and where you want to align your subject is generally along one of those lines or one of the intersection points, right? This is not exactly a third, but what I'm trying to draw your eye to is the mountain range at the bottom, right? And so this is not at the exact bottom of the frame, and it's not in the exact middle. I want to give a sense of scale with the sky and try to get these valleys, which sort of worked. But I have aligned my subject along the third line, or very close to it, right? You don't have to be religious about it. Here is again, it doesn't translate as well as I would hope. Maybe if I had better camera equipment, but this is all mountain ranges going back like 30 or 40 miles. I don't know, 20 miles. I don't know how far you can see from the top of a mountain. But you just, I can't show the depth the way I want to. This is the summit. That's Mount Bierstadt. Here are a little bunch of flowers that were under snow when I was on my way out. Like, when I was on my way to the top of the mountain, there was snow covering these flowers entirely, like 2-3 inches of snow. By the time I was on my way back, a lot of that snow had melted, which kind of made it worse because the trail was much slushier on my way back. And I slid a lot more. I fucked up my ankle, which was pretty miserable. But let's see, that's not very interesting. That's a pretty good picture of Mount Square Top, or Square Top Mountain, whatever they call it. I think that one's better. That's a pretty good picture of Mount Bierstadt. So that's Mount Bierstadt, and I guess this is the Sawtooth. These little yellow flowers, again, they were just totally under the snow. And snow melted, and then there were flowers. It is amazing how life works in the mountains. Like, the fact that you can have these flowers blooming, fully, like, looking beautiful, within the same morning that they were buried under multiple inches of snow at 12,000 feet. It's pretty cool. This one is, I think this is on the way back. I took a little video. See, these are all right, but it's difficult to convey the scale. Yeah, that's true. You are in the what, subtropical zone? I think that one's pretty good. And again, I have this thirds. The lake it's not a great lake. It's a, I'm sure it would be a nice lake if I was down there, but it's not like a hugely photogenic lake from like at the crater or at the glacier. Right? This isn't like reflective or anything. So I don't care. I keep it in there, but the thirds along this bottom line, and then kind of in this area where we got these peaks, is what I'm trying to highlight. I feel like that. That turned out pretty well. What's going on here? I feel like I have I just am way behind on seeing myself on the stream. I'm way behind. And so I was like, I thought I fixed that. Yeah, that's a good one. That one is okay, but I would need to crop it because all this is meaningless in here. Yeah, you just take several and pick the one you like best later. I'm very grateful to live in a world where I don't have to shoot on film. So on the way back, I did see some bighorn sheep. And on the side of the road, in the woods on my way down, I saw what I am pretty confident was a moose. I I didn't manage to look at the moose very closely because I was driving, and there were people behind me, so I couldn't stop. But there are moose in that part of the state, so it's very probable that it was a moose. It was, it was barely a moose sighting, but it was cool. It was cool to say, hey, I'm pretty sure I saw at least part of a moose today. But yeah, there's the bighorn sheep, just in the road. Yellowstone would be amazing. We're talking about doing either Yellowstone or Yosemite as a trip. Probably not this summer, but since she gets the summer off from school, that's something that can be planned much more easily when only one person has to worry about vacation. So we will probably do that at some point, assuming the world continues to hold together, which who knows. Yeah, that'd be fun. My cousin actually went to Yellowstone last summer. And then I went to Idaho Springs and had a coffee and a big ass cookie. The cookie is like the size of my face, and $3. It's a great deal. Like, you're still overpaying, but you're always overpaying, and you're overpaying less for this one. But I mean, it's basically the same stuff I would do with Bethany, but just by myself. We lived in Kansas for fucking 4 years, and I don't resent her for it, and I don't resent it. It was pretty fine while it lasted. It was really boring. I don't club, I don't drink. I don't have bros that I go do stuff with. I live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, and I want to go do things and enjoy it, right? After living in the flattest place on earth for 4 years. So this is what I want to do. And it's either this or we go to the farmer's market on the weekends. And what is, I don't know what is better than getting high and going and wandering around a farmer's market in a beautiful part of the country and trying samples, and maybe you get a little coffee or a pastry. You find a local candle maker. We really like scented candles, so you find a local candle maker that's making cool stuff, or you get some local honey, which we did last week it was the first week of the season, and we got some local honey to try and help with allergies, which may be bullshit. I don't know, but I have heard that honey with local pollen can help people who have local allergies. So hopefully that's true, but either way, we have local honey now from people who have neighborhood bees. It's cool. I like it. I look like every other bitch in the state. I'm telling you, if you go to a farmer's market in Denver or Boulder, you will see an infinite number of white dudes with long hair, usually a man bun, sometimes dreads, mustache, probably a melly, or a Patagonia vest or a Patagonia fleece and some Hokas. Like, that is every single dude out here. And it is funny. I still stick out a little bit because I'm tall, but my look is extremely mainstream, which is kind of unusual for me. The nails are still not that normal, but everything else is. Let's go. Which is the one you were... I think this was the one you were talking about that you really liked. I might crop it in some. Crop this peak out. Kind of restricted to this area. But, I mean, look, so the hike, I'm glad I did it. It was a beautiful hike. And I was fortunate enough that I had a very good thrifting day on Friday. Again, wife is out of town. I'm planning to hike on Saturday. So instead of getting off work and going straight to bed, I decided I would just stay up and try to go to bed early, but not crazy early, so that I could wake up around 5 and be pretty good and getting enough sleep. So I was trying to figure out how to keep myself occupied, and video games, sitting around at home, you just will fall asleep. So too tired to go to the gym, just went out and went to a bunch of thrift stores. I went to 2 Goodwills and 3 Arcs, and I found a hiking backpack. I found some hiking poles, some extendable hiking poles, which were incredibly clutch. I do not think I could have done the hike had I not had poles with me, because the snow at points was 2 feet deep, 3 feet deep, and I really needed the poles to brace myself. And then I fucked up my ankle on the way down, so I needed them as crutches. That was miserable. It's just fortunate that I've done it so many times that I'm pretty used to that pain, and you just kind of have to go on. But I found, actually, this Nalgene that I am drinking out of. I've been wanting a Nalgene bottle for a while, and have just been kind of holding off on buying one. And then I found one for 99 cents. That's an REI Nalgene, and I put stickers on it. So now I am even more like every other bitch out here. But anyway, so I had a really good thrifting day, and I got some Vuori shorts. I got a Helly Hansen shirt. I got some. I look a lot more well off financially than I am, because I just find good brands at thrift stores. And frankly, that's ethical. So I really want to try and fill up my wardrobe with the highest quality stuff I can get that's not that there's still a difference between that and something of basic quality, right? I don't need a Loro Piana white undershirt, but a Polo white undershirt is better than a Walmart one, right? That's kind of what I aim for in shopping. I don't need the highest end stuff, because I don't think that you can tell much of a difference after a certain point. But I do want to try and build my wardrobe with quality stuff. So, a lot of 90s LL Bean stuff, or Patagonia stuff, because there's a reason people buy it. It is built well, and it is better than a thing you would get at Walmart. So I'm trying to do that. I also am not super radical about minimizing consumption, but I have always valued a good deal. And I dated a girl for a while who was super into just buying dead stock and like thrifting. I have been like a yard sailor since the 90s, right? With my mom, because my mom grew up poor. So for them, yard sailing was like sort of a important thing to do. For us, it was a practical thing because sometimes you can get really good stuff for really cheap, and you might as well do that. But it wasn't so necessary. But my mom really enjoys Goodwill. It's the thrill of the find, right? You're hunting through and you're like, I know what good stuff is and I know what I'm looking for. And most of the time you strike out. But every once in a while, you're like, that is like pristine. And it's $12. It's like, what a great deal I have found for myself. So we were on eBay at the very beginning of eBay. I've done Depop. It frustrates me because it's not pure anymore. You know, people don't do it for. I'm a middle-aged person who just wants to get this thing out of my fucking house. It's mostly business now. And people are doing research into how much you should charge for things, so there are fewer good deals. It is easier to find stuff specifically that you want, right? That's the value. If you're looking specifically for a 90s crew neck, like a Russell 90s crew neck, you're probably going to overpay for it, but you can find it. Whereas if you go to your local Goodwill, you might be able to find one, but you will have to probably go many times to find the specific item you're looking for. Like, I've been looking for a good pair of Levi 501s in my size for months and months. And I've found some that are close, and I've found some that are the wrong color, or, but I'm patient, and I don't have to have them. So I want to get a pair of them, but I'm not going to pay extra to get them. But I love going in and scanning. I'm a pretty quick shopper, but like the thing I would use stuff like Poshmark or eBay for are specific brands or band, like band tees or sweatshirts. I've gotten multiple band shirts from Depop, I think, specifically. And it is great for that because it's like, I'm looking for this specific shirt or this specific tour shirt, right? It was tour only, and I didn't get to go to the tour, but somebody's selling it, and so I can have it. But I don't do that much anymore. The older I get, the more I move into not a lot of text, not a lot of anything really on my clothing. I have like 6 different colors of a very similar Henley / light sweater shirt. So I'm toning it down a lot in how I dress, based on. I think you can still have fun. I think you can still have fun when you get old, and you can still be stylish and, but I am I am much more comfortable letting go of the person I thought I really wanted to be when I was in my 20s. It's like, you start dressing like you are a teenager, and people think that you want to fit in with 19-year-olds. And either you do, and that's a problem. That's very weird. It's funny that you said 19. I did sort of pick that at random. But that it's so, like, all I can think about is the fucking teenagers you are trying to hang out with talking about the old person trying to hang out with them at their shift at Starbucks or at Hollister, right? They're like, that was weird, right? And I don't want to be that guy. I am a weird guy, and I am willing to be a weird guy. But I'm not going to be trying to hang out with 21-year-olds because I want them to think I'm cool. They should think I'm cool. I have done a lot of cool shit in my life. Like, I don't need them to respect me because they haven't done anything interesting. And I was in a fashion show that Britney Spears was at. So, I don't care. I don't care about what you think. But what I do care is that you don't talk shit about me trying to hang out with high schoolers. Because here's the thing. It doesn't matter how cool you are when they find out how old you are. Because then it's weird. It's fine until then, but then it's weird. Alright. Yeah. I do think I got some good photos. I didn't get as much as I was hoping. Just is what it is. It was a very beautiful day, but all of the snow, like, it's very stark and it is very striking, but you have very similar looks wherever you go. It is white and covered in snow. So when I'm able to do that again, when there's grass and flowers and trees in bloom, bushes, it will, well, I think we will probably go do it. We'll do part of it. The trail is, I think it's about 4 miles from start to peak, and then it's 4 miles back, obviously. But there's no real elevation gain until you're about 3 miles in, maybe 3.5 even. It is it's a pretty flat walk. There's a little bit up and down, but there's no real climbing. There's no real hills for the first 2/3 probably of the hike, if not more. So that's easy enough. It's beautiful the whole way, and when it's warm and not snowy, so she's not slipping and sliding, it will be perfectly fine. We just might not summit the mountain, or I might just go summit it and she might stay at the bottom. Because this she would be able to do, and it would be worth doing. Driving the Guanella Pass is, oh man, it was so beautiful. Every corner you come around, it's like, Jesus Christ, that's a view. It was worth it, really, even just for the drive. And Guanella Pass is famous out here. I think I've talked about leaf peeping before, but it's a thing people do in Colorado. It's its own term, where you go out and you look at the fall leaves changing. And there are some parts of the state that are particularly famous for being good leaf peeping areas. And Guanella Pass is one of them. Usually it's a place that has a ton of aspens, right? Because aspens all change at once and they are so vibrant. It's incredible to see a huge field of aspens all going bright yellow. So people go out to see them. And Guanella Pass is famous enough that they have like state, I don't know, county like signage like an official pole with the green sign with a picture on it, with a leaf and a magnifying glass, signifying leaf peeping areas. There are a bunch of rules about where you can park and stuff, because in the fall, apparently, it is quite a destination. It was beautiful drive. It's like 20 miles up through like windy mountain roads, up to the Mount Bierstadt trailhead. Just gorgeous. But I actually had something specific I wanted to do on the stream other than look at my photos and talk about my hike. I responded, I don't know, responded is not the right term. I watched a video from Corey and talked about it. And then I told him that I did, because I don't want to do that without, like, letting him know. And he then watched it and left a comment. And I haven't read the comment, so I don't know what he said. I'm sure it was thoughtful and polite. Like, I don't, he's not flaming me. But I wanna look at it and talk about, you know, if there's anything I feel like I need to answer or clarify, because I think that's fair. And I will probably tell him that I have done so, just so that there's, you know, no sneakiness. But yeah, so he left me a comment. I don't know what it was. Okay. So, copies of copies of copies is a popular airman phrase that makes it sound like we're playing the telephone game. In fact, the way manuscripts were copied and the various batches that have been recovered in different areas make it workable for scholars to reconstruct the original text with what they, including airmen, believe is near 100% accuracy, and where there are disputes, the variations do not affect the meaning in any substantive way. The reference to copies of copies is therefore misleading. Substantively, we have reconstructions of the original documents. Biblical scholars, Christian or not, agree on this. This is largely true. I mean, I have seen several people talk about, like, the way manuscripts were copied. There are plenty of examples of issues with copying, but I'm not really interested in pursuing that angle. My position more is, we can talk about originals and having, you know, reconstructions of the earliest Matthew or whatever. We can talk about that. But the problem we have is, these were people who spoke Aramaic and could not read or write, very likely. By and large, people in this time were not literate, unless you were specifically trained to be a scribe or a priest, right? And we're talking about fishermen, who are some of the disciples, so I'm not impugning their good name. I'm just saying it is very unlikely that they would know how to read or write. If they did know how to read or write, it's highly unlikely that they would read or write in Greek, because they would have spoken Aramaic, and they were occupied by the Romans, who did not speak Greek, right? So what I am saying is, copies of copies is true, but how do we know that Matthew was written down in Greek first? Because the writer of Matthew, whoever it was, wrote the text in Greek. That's our earliest sources, is Greek, right? So, all right, Greek. But they would have spoken Aramaic. So you have to assume either that Matthew the disciple, and also Mark the disciple, and also John, all of whom were disciples, you have to assume that all of them were inspired. One of two things. Either God did a miracle, right? He supernaturally put the Greek in their pen. So they were like auto writing, right? They were writing in a language that they did not speak or read or understand. And that is totally possible if God is like they talk about it in Acts 2. If God is that powerful of a God that we think he is as Christians, then he could totally do that. Now, I reject this because I don't believe the supernatural is real. But that is a theory. There is another position you could take, which is that they dictated it. That it's that's impossible to prove or disprove, but again, why would they were Jewish is the thing, right? This is Jewish people from a Jewish community in Palestine who would have been largely writing to other Jewish people in Palestine. Why would they write in Greek if their audience was fellow Jewish people living in that area, or greater Palestine, the Jewish people living in Egypt, right? Now, although they probably would have spoken Greek because of the Ptolemies, but the people living in Palestine and Israel, they wouldn't have spoken Greek. So why would you write it in Greek? So you could say maybe there were original texts that were in Aramaic or possibly in Hebrew, which again, they probably wouldn't have been able to write because that was not the lingua franca. That was like when you go to Catholic Church and the liturgy's in Latin. That's what Hebrew kind of was. It was a religious language, but it wasn't like common everyday language for most people. So you either have to say it was written magically through the power of God, getting this guy to write in a language that he didn't speak or understand, or they had somebody write it for them in Greek for some reason, or they wrote it in Aramaic first and then it got translated into Greek, which conceivably is possible, right? I mean, maybe they were in the 5% of people that could write, but then you have to question how accurate the Greek translation is, right? Because if we say, well, it was written in Aramaic first, and we don't have any shred of Aramaic anything, and the earliest texts that we have, the earliest like copies of fragments of the New Testament, like the Gospels and stuff, is, I think it's the middle of the 2nd century, maybe very late 1st century, but I think it's like 150 is the earliest scrap of anything we have. We have earlier texts, like there are plenty. The Dead Sea Scrolls are much older in many cases, but as far as a piece of the New Testament, right, the Gospels and Paul, we don't have any of that for like 100 years. So, okay, even if the Greek is accurate all the way back, that still doesn't point us to the Aramaic, if there was Aramaic. And anyway, so copies of copies of copies is a little bit maybe dismissive, but reductive, I would say. It's maybe a little bit reductive, but I think I have made the point that I'm trying to make, which is we don't have originals. No matter how much we think we can recreate the original text, why would we believe that the original text was Greek? Because, again, since I don't believe that magic is real, it does not convince me for you to say, well, we know that it's in Greek because God did a miracle. Okay? God, sure. But I don't believe in God. So that's not a good enough justification for me, for you to say magic happened. That's why it was written in Greek by somebody who didn't speak Greek, or God taught them all Greek. I don't think, I think I was possibly reductive, but I do not think that my underlying point is affected by this comment. this portion here. So next one. Regarding feminism, this will be fun. First, I'm certainly not the first to point out that the sexual liberation of the 70s ended up just making it easier for men to exploit women sexually and rolled out the carpet for the Me Too movement by increasing sexual exploitation of women. I am unsure. Oh no. This is not a thoughtful argument. I'll try to be detailed. Thanks for hanging out. Enjoy the rest of your day. Okay. Not the first to point out that sexual liberation in the 70s ended up just making it easier for men to exploit women sexually and rolled out the carpet for the Me Too movement. What is your evidence for that? What is your proof that it was made easier for men to exploit women sexually? I mean, prostitution had been happening in this country for a long time prior to the 70s. Marital rape wasn't even like a law. I don't even know if it is in some parts of the country to this day. But certainly not within the church. Marital rape was not a thing that existed. It was legally not a crime. So giving women more control over who they have sex with and when, I don't know how that is making it more easy for men to exploit women sexually. Women have agency. If you are going to assault and molest a woman, you are going to do that in the 50s or in the 80s. It doesn't really matter. If that's what you want to do, you are not really concerned about the legality of what you're doing. Because whether you're talking about the 40s or the 90s or the 2020s, forcible assault is wrong, right? Having sex with somebody without their consent is wrong, because they don't get to have a say. They don't get to be part of that decision. That hasn't changed at all. What has changed is that some women are more willing to come out and talk about the things that have been done to them. Many of these things are not new. Like, what was Bill Cosby, was his stuff because of wokeness or whatever? Like, creepy people in power will abuse their power if they're allowed to. But that's not news. That's always been true. Like, for thousands of years, that's been true. People will take advantage of other people if given the opportunity to, and especially if there are likely to be no repercussions to them personally. But eventually, you get to a point in society where women start to feel like they can talk about the things that have been done to them. Mostly, people don't believe them. Historically, mostly, people talk about how they're trying to get attention or money. And they don't consider the fact that, there sure are a lot of examples of mostly men doing that, who have positions of power that are shown to be true, and are not just people trying to get money. That's always been happening. It's just that you hear more about it now, because there are, in some cases, repercussions for doing that kind of stuff. Mostly there aren't. Even to this day, mostly there are not. Criminal or social repercussions for raping somebody. But there are supposed to be. And you get it more now than you did 50 years ago. Or 80 years ago. When some of the things that are crimes today were not crimes. Before the 70s. So I don't know. I mean, again, okay, you're not the first to point it out. I don't know who else is talking about this, but you didn't mention their names, so I don't know what you want me to do with that. All right, second, yes, the Bible is remarkably feminist in its cultural context. The litany of strong female leaders in the Old and New Testaments, the women Jesus counterculturally interacted with, the fact of Jesus taking female disciples, Paul's insistence that husband and wives must mutually submit. This is a long. I know all of these things. I'll read it all because I'm going to be fair, but I already can respond to this, but I will go through it. It's just a long chunk of text. Paul's insistence that husbands and wives must mutually submit to each other. Paul's insistence to let the women learn along with the men in a culture where women were generally barred from theological education. Paul's long list of female leaders and co-workers, Romans 16. The Bible in its cultural context powerfully dignifies women. Okay, no, I'll read the whole thing. And then I'll go back. If you read it through a 21st century American lens without acknowledging the cultural difference, it will distort your view of the text. Also, helper used to describe women in Genesis is the same word used to describe God helping Israel, and similar to the helper used to describe the Holy Spirit in the New Testament, certainly not a derogatory term or a sign of subjection. The Proverbs 31 woman, Deborah, Ruth, Queen Esther, the Marys, the women who worked with Jesus and the apostles, etc., are strong, dignified, influential women. That's what I mean by real feminism. Perhaps that's why Christianity is especially popular with women, more so than men. I am not going to presume to know why Christianity is more popular with women than with men, but that could be part of it. I, at no point, said that there are no women in the Bible, and it is, I'm pretty sure I said it in my video. If I didn't, I apologize for the oversight. It is fairly unusual to have a genealogy with a bunch of women in it. You do get into trouble in the New Testament with Jesus' genealogy because one line traces through Joseph, who's not his father. So if he's connected to David as through the prophecy through Joseph, then he's not, because he is not his real father. He's not the stepdad. He's the dad who stepped up. That's an aside, but sure. Many of the things that he points out here are true. But these are hardly the first significant women in history. There were female rulers of many different kingdoms throughout history. There were, I talked about this. I assume Corey skimmed. That's fine. But I was either talking about this in Trent or in Corey. I don't remember which video I was talking about it in, but I know I did. Talk about how Egypt had female pharaohs, as well as female regents who were ruling in the place of their sons who were 6 years old. So she was in charge, even if she wasn't officially the titled pharaoh. 1,000 years before the Bible was written down. Some of the first, I think the earliest recorded poetry. I don't remember if it's poetry or a song, whatever it is. The earliest recorded piece we have was written by a woman who was a high priestess of, I think it was an Assyrian cult. It might have been Akkadian. I try to be good with my historical cultures, but I get Assyrian and Akkadian mixed up. But it was in the 1900s, BCE. So that's well before the Bible. That's 1,000 years before even some of the earliest stuff starts to get written down. So, okay, sure, you can point to some of those things, but I can respond to those verses within the same verse, almost. Paul is saying, yes, husbands, love your wives the way Christ loves the church. But also, husbands, you are the head of the family. Wives, you are to submit. Wives are to submit. Husbands are to love their wives. It does not say submit. It says love. So, that is a difference in levels in that relationship. Now, it's great. That's great advice. You should love your wife or your husband. You should hopefully have a marriage where you love each other. But Paul was telling women they need to submit. Paul said, I do not permit a woman to speak. So, all right, maybe you can say he is a little bit pro-woman by letting them learn. But he also doesn't let them talk. So they're not allowed to teach the men. Like, now you can say that maybe those weren't actually written by Paul, but then you get into other issues with the reliability of the New Testament. Taking female disciples, I assume he's talking about like maybe Mary and Martha. There were none in the 12, right? So I'm not exactly sure what he is saying as disciple. If he just means female followers, then that's one thing, but that's not the same as a disciple. So the Samaritan woman, that's an interesting passage, but I think that's only in Matthew. Oh God, I'm gonna have to look it up. Where did we see the Samaritan woman? Oh, it's in John. Okay, so this was in John. And this is the last gospel written probably around the turn of the 2nd century. So, it is surprising that this story is in there, because there were significant theological differences between Samaritan Jews and Jerusalem Jews. I don't know them all well enough to go into detail, so that's my own issue. A lot of it has to do with the centralization of worship, right? The woman asks, "Where should we worship?" And so this is explaining why you don't have to worship at the temple, basically. She says, our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you claim that the place we must worship is Jerusalem. Believe me, there is a time coming when we will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. He does shit on her a little bit. You worship what you don't know. We worship what we do know, because salvation comes from us. But there's a time coming when you won't have to worship at the temple anywhere. Which is, okay, the temple was destroyed, right? And the temple was destroyed in like 70 AD. I believe we're talking about like the 80s or the 90s. Bart Ehrman, who is a boogeyman to many. Corey mentions Bart Ehrman. But if the Gospel of John was written around the end of the 1st century, that means the temple has already been destroyed, right? And this is an apocalyptic cult. And you have to recontextualize why the prophecies failed. I don't know when exactly it was written, but if people suggest that it was written towards the end of the 1st century, that would indicate that it was written after the destruction of the temple, and that I'm not claiming that is why this story is in John, but it makes sense to put something in about how you don't have to worship at the temple anymore. It doesn't matter where you worship, because it's the spirit and truth. It makes sense to be recontextualizing what happened by saying, it's okay. I know that our place of worship is gone, and like the presence of God is gone, but it's okay. You can still worship even if you don't have the temple. verse that, okay. What else? Female disciples have dealt with that. Let women learn. I mean, yeah, that's good. He's not necessarily saying that they should learn how to write, but yeah, it's an apocalyptic cult, and the world is about to end. And yes, people do talk about the female people in the church. That is cool. That's great. That these women are getting a shout out for working hard. Timothy, which is probably not written by Paul, but Timothy also talks about his mother and grandmother and how great they were doing raising him up because his dad was dead or something. So yes, there are female women mentioned in the Bible. Esther is an interesting one. That one is, boy, a lot of people didn't want to put it in the Bible. And I think the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think it's Esther, is the only book that does not show up at all among the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they maybe just really didn't like it. But yeah, Ruth, Esther, again, it is somewhat unusual, but it's not unique. There are plenty of historically known women who were operating, like we know about Queen Boudica, right? She fought the Romans around the same time the New Testament was being written, I think a little earlier, but that's within living memory. Maybe not, but that's within a few generations of memory of people who exist in the first century. So yeah, it is kind of unusual, but it's not that unique. Plenty of other cultures had strong female women, like leaders and rulers and generals and things. It's unique in this culture because it was deeply patriarchal, and women were property. Women were literal chattel property. Okay, so I think I have done this. Also, why does a woman need to be dignified to be a real feminist? I think you can live life however you want to. Okay, you make a few tongue-in-cheek comments on magic. Some might point out that thinking our universe invented and designed itself out of nothing and for no reason is a lot more absurd than what you're calling magic. It looks like a design to us. That does not mean it is a design. It looks like a design to us, but the universe is incredibly vast. Look, I have no interest in aliens. I don't really believe in them or care. But with the universe the size ours is, the number of galaxies we know about, and the ones that we don't, you roll the dice enough times, you get a planet that's the right distance away from a heat source. And you probably get more than one, right? So it's a big universe. The other part of that is we don't necessarily know how all life functions, because there might be life that we don't know how to measure. When we look at it, we can't measure it as alive, but in some sense it is alive, right? Even if it's not a carbon-based life form, it might still be life. It might still be intelligent. We can't measure it on our tools. We don't have a way to understand it. I think that's extremely possible, right? But again, I don't care. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything about my life. The point I'm trying to make is designed is not the correct word. Designed is assuming that this universe was designed for humans to live on it. But for one thing, it wasn't, because humans didn't live on it for a really long time. There were all kinds of things happening and changing, and volcanoes, and there was no oxygen for a while. Like, a lot of things had to happen in order for humans to even be able to exist. But that doesn't mean our planet is unique in the entire universe as being a rock that's the right distance away and has the right stuff on it to create some sort of life form. It just, this is the kind of life that developed on this planet. And who knows? Right? That's my genuine take. And my honest thought is I also still do not care. I don't think it's very interesting. We're not going to interact with them, so what do I care? You know, it's not going to happen. But some people think it's really interesting. The point is, it doesn't mean there's a design. It means we think there's a design because the way the world is, we are able to live in it. We are able to exist and think thoughts about ourselves. And we're like, wow, we can live here. This must be made for us. But, like, imagine you're a mouse crawling into a toilet paper tube. You're like, man, this must have been designed for me. Even though it wasn't. But it feels like it's designed for you because you can exist within it. I feel like I'm getting very into abstract ideas here, and I generally don't want to do that. But anyway, I don't think that this is a good argument. He is saying that it was designed, and I don't agree that it was designed. No matter your worldview, there are difficult or impossible things to wrap your mind around. Reality is big and strange and incomprehensible on any worldview. Sure. I fully concede that point. Your worldview just has the added benefit of being absurd right down to the foundation, or as you termed it, absurdist. Yes, absurdist is a philosophical position, which is basically there is no meaning to life, but we got to keep living it. So we will create meaning to have. We will decide to do things despite the fact that there's no real reason to do things, and when we die, that's it. Nihilism tends to be more, there is no reason to do anything, and so I will commit suicide. Right? That, I mean, I'm not dismissing that as a philosophical position, but like that is true. Pretty often, the root of nihilism leads you to there is nothing, and there is no reason to do anything, and that's really hard for me to live with, because if there really isn't anything, and there's nothing after I live, and it doesn't matter what I do, like, why do I get up tomorrow? And that, again, what happens is then you move to absurdism, where you say, there is no reason to do something tomorrow, but I will do it anyway. I will make my life meaningful. I will make meaning out of nothing, right? I will decide that there is meaning, even though I know that there isn't any. And I will just choose to live in that. It is what it is. That, I think, it's a reasonable position for me to take, because I don't think that there is any grand, like, plan, right? I don't think that this was planned. I don't think that there is a plan for humans. I just think it happened this way, and I'm here now. But I will continue to do things. And I'll continue to experience things, because that's all I can do. Okay. Classical theists stand in a long philosophical tradition. Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, Aquinas, Leibniz, and plenty of other world-class thinkers that treats mind and reason as more fundamental than matter. I don't mind situating myself alongside them even when people like you belittle their views as magic believers. Listen, you can stand with whatever intellectuals you want. There are plenty of intellectuals who take the other position, right? There are plenty of intellectuals who are not Christian intellectuals, who have different ideas about the universe and the supernatural. I do say magic because I understand that it's a little bit reductive and it's a little bit flippant, but it is also accurate in my assessment. What is the supernatural? To a human, it's magic. Like, I'm not saying it's a sleight of hand. I'm not saying that it's like as a derogatory term. I'm saying it is indistinguishable from magic. What would the difference be? The difference between magic and the supernatural is, I guess, humans can do magic. But people in the Bible were doing magic. So I guess that's real. Like, again, this is the stuff you have to fucking deal with. The people were casting out demons in Jesus' name, and the apostles told them to stop. But it doesn't say they were pretending to cast out demons. It says they were doing it. Simon the sorcerer. That's literally his title, right? We know him as the sorcerer. Now, you can hem and haw about what specifically they mean by magic, but I will just go back to the Witch of Endor, who raised Samuel from the ground, and Saul saw him and recognized him, and Samuel saw Saul and recognized Saul and spoke to him as a ghost. And Saul was considered to be bad for doing that, but it is not positioned as a made-up story. It is positioned as a real thing that really happened. They raised a person from the dead to talk to Saul, like at a seance. So, I don't believe that's possible. That's magic. But you either have to believe it is possible, because the Bible says it is, or you have to say that story is not true or is wrong. At which point I start to have other questions about the text, right? I understand that it comes off as a little dismissive, and I understand that I'm at this point directing it to Corey. I understand that you are a Christian and an apologist and somebody who's read a bunch of philosophy, and you're a smart guy, and I recognize all of those things. But I'm not dismissing that. But to me, when you break it down, you have to accept that magic is real, both in the raising a ghost and talking to it real, and also like the other supernatural, walking on the water, breaking the laws of physics, right? What is the difference between magic and the supernatural? If they both break the laws of physics, they are both magic. Okay, like that is what I'm saying. It is, yes, simplifying it, but I don't want to do this every time I talk about it. Again, I would just say to the world-class thinkers, you are, I'll just I'll assume the opposing position. What about all the smart people who had science? Like, what about them? Right? What about people who have telescopes? What about the idea that the sun was at the center of the universe for a really long time? Like, we can talk about the great stuff the Christians did, and people do this for like I've lost my train of thought entirely. I'm sure it wasn't that important. I started reading ahead and I distracted myself. I'm just saying that the entire world was magic for like until the Enlightenment for most people. You mostly, all you could do was argue about what kind of God there was. There was no real atheism. Like, free thinkers started to happen in the 1700s, 1600s. There certainly were people who pushed back on the idea that there was a supernatural or that there was God, but you weren't really investigating that direction. It was why my God is more right than your God. Whether that's Christians going against other Christians, Christians going against Jews, Jews against Muslims, Muslims against Christians, Christians against Muslims, anybody against the Zoroastrians, anybody against native religions in Africa, right? Animism. But now you are allowed to ask questions about what if God isn't real? And there are a lot of intellectuals who are asking those kinds of questions. The reason I go into that sort of historical context is because, yeah, Plato was writing 2,500 years ago, 2,300 years ago. Most of the scientist intellectuals who are writing about non-Christian forms of philosophy are from within the last few hundred years. I mean, Lahontan, there was a Native American guy who was pretty influential in the 1600s. I don't remember if he was an atheist, but he was critical of Christianity and Western lifestyles. I'm just saying, you can say, well, look at all these smart people who believed this. And I can point to smart people on my side who believe that they're wrong. So you just think your guys are better than my guys, even though, you know, what, because it's older? Like, is that the theory? Because otherwise, these guys have all the information that the people who are writing in the 3rd century, 1st century, 10th century, you have all, even Leibniz, right? You have all the data they had. You have all the information they had. And also, all the advancements of modern science. All of the advancements of archaeology and history, dating of objects, understanding of how elements interact and how things are built. We just know a lot more than we used to. You used to have to explain everything with magic, with gods, with the deities are doing this and that. And this is why winter happens. But we don't have to do that anymore because we have a more sophisticated understanding of how those things work. And I don't say sophisticated to be snobby. I mean, up until 1900, we thought you got malaria because of poison gases. Literally, we figured out malaria during the construction of the Panama Canal. That's when they figured out that it was transmitted by mosquito. Malaria literally means bad air or bad vapors. That's what the term, they thought you got sick because you were out late at night or you partied too hard. But now we know that that's not the case, right? And I don't hear anybody saying, well, listen, all these great thinkers were convinced that malaria was caused by being a roustabout and consorting with women of the night. That's how you got malaria. That was the thinking. And they were wrong. And we know that they were wrong, and we know what malaria is now. So, you can point to people from a long time ago who we respect as smart guys who were writing smart stuff. Galen was pretty smart as a physician, right? He was hugely influential for hundreds of years. Most of his shit was crazy wrong. It's like ridiculous. But it was very influential. Also, I think he was basing a lot of his work on Muslim scholars, but we don't have to get into that here. I'm just saying, you can point to your famous guys, and I can point to my famous guys, and it's a stalemate. You say, well, I don't trust them. And I say, okay, those people had sex with animals. You know, and I don't trust them either, really. Okay, you appeal to science as a grounding for morality since some animals or people behave morally without any religious belief. That's a non sequitur. How so? I don't appeal to science as a grounding for morality. I guess I appeal to naturalistic ideas. Humans have figured out that cooperating is a lot more successful than not cooperating. And so mostly we cooperate. That's true. And I don't think that I'm like, science proves that morals are relative. But morals are relative because different cultures value different things based on their religion. Honor killings, theft, deception versus integrity. These are all different aspects of different religions all across the world, that they believe different things are valuable in their society. And like your virtue signaling. If you are doing this thing, that's a sign that you're a good person or a upstanding citizen in our society, in our religion, which might be totally anathema to some other religions, right? maybe even all of the other ones. But that, I might think you're wrong, but it does mean that your interpretation of morality is different than mine. I probably think mine is more right because it's mine. And maybe I think what you're doing is icky. Maybe it's illegal in my society, and maybe it should be illegal. But if the society you're a part of doesn't consider it to be immoral, then what that shows is that morality is relative. It doesn't show that they're right, but it shows that they are able to believe something that I think is immoral is entirely moral. And that's not a contradiction for them. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about, I guess, when I say science. On atheism, it may be that animals, yes, us included, evolved morality to increase survivability. That doesn't mean morality has any logical, philosophical grounding. It just means morality can be useful in some circumstances for preserving your genes. Apart from Imago Dei, you will not find any grounding for morality. It's an ultimately arbitrary instinct that will die with the rest of the universe, and so what? Yes, I agree with this. Yes, I agree with this statement. I know I'm supposed to think that this is profound, and I'm not saying Corey's a bad writer. I'm just saying I agree with this. Yes, I think that morality is a human construct, much like religion. I think that we have found the ways that society works, and we try a bunch of ways, and we decide that some of them don't work, and we reject them. And then some people try to bring them back. But is it immoral to use birth control? Some people say yes. But some people are dumb as fuck. So I disagree. The kind, loving, generous person will lay in the grave alongside Hitler and both alongside all victims of injustice, and it will make no difference whether any of them were moral or not. All those stories end the same way. No justice is done, no suffering is redeemed, there's just a return to the void. I would expect an absurdist to own this. I believe I have thoroughly owned it. I agree with all of that. It's a bummer. I was thinking this morning at work, I was thinking about the passage that says, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. And, in the church, usually that's interpreted as like, don't be violent, don't hurt anybody because you reap what you sow, right? That's the impression. But that's just fucking wrong. That's just like factually not borne out. Plenty of soldiers die, and plenty of criminals who do violent crimes die, or are murdered, or are, killed in some way. And so then you can be like, yeah, see, you live by the sword, right? That's a moral for you. That's a moral for the story. And sure, but there are an awful lot of people who don't. There are an awful lot of people who live by the sword and live out their lives, and everything is fine. They commit a bunch of crimes. Maybe they kill some people, and they die, and nobody ever catches them, and they're fine. And maybe they even got rich doing it. Right? And now, we can also talk about people in the military. That verse is used often to discourage Christians from being in the military, or as a justification for Christians to reject serving, right? Because the Bible says that if you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword, and we're peaceful. So, sure, you can say that, but you don't see all the people dying by the sword that you would like to see dying by the sword as it goes. Like, it's just some dictators get killed, and some dictators live into their 80s rich as fuck and die fat and happy, or skinny and happy. Like, they commit all kinds of atrocities and kill all kinds of people and do all sorts of horrible things and mismanage the state's finances, and they die of old age peaceful. Like, yeah, it sucks. It sucks that happens. The Bible says it will happen. I believe it. But I believe it because I see it. The Bible says God causes it to rain on the righteous and the wicked. That's true. And it's frustrating because you see how all the bad these people are doing, and they're not being punished for it. And they may never be punished for it. And that's why hell is a really good thing to believe in. Because they're not being punished in this life, which sucks, because they're bad and I want to see them be punished. I have those same feelings, right? Punish the villains is my watchword. So I would love to see some people get some comeuppance for the evil things they do. Evil in my assessment of morality, just so that there's no, I'm not, this is my position, okay? Evil things that are being done by people in power to people with no power. I think that's bad. I think it's bad to exploit people. And I think it's bad that they have millions or billions of dollars and are entirely insulated from the consequences of their actions. So it's nice to say, well, yes, that stinks. That stinks. They have all this power and all this money and they're getting away with it and nobody cares. Their life is fine. And I'm over here scraping, right? But I'm righteous and they're going to go to hell. Now, there are many different interpretations of hell, different, right? I'm not saying that your vision of hell is specifically horrific or torturous, but for most people, the way you would talk about hell is it's like being removed from the presence of God, right? You no longer have access to God, and that's hell. So it's not a lake of fire, it's not pitchforks, it's just being away from God. Now, whatever, some people want it to be torture, but you want these people to be punished, and hell is the backstop. They might not be punished in this life, but in the next life, man, I'm gonna be so set, and they're gonna be fucking burning. And that's a great thing. That's a great feeling. Helps you get through the day. Because it's like, man, when I die, it's all going to pay off. These scumbags that have all the money and the power and are doing horrible things, they're going to pay for it. And I am going to go live in a mansion up on the hilltop. I'm being a little bit jocular in my tone here. But I'm taking this seriously. That is a comforting thing to believe in. And it gets a lot of people through a lot of shit. So I'm not saying it's not comforting, but I also don't think it's true. It's comforting, but it's not true. Bad people, a lot of the time they get away with it. Good people, a lot of the time they live a life of obscurity and die in poverty. It's sad. It's sad that it works that way. I would like us to try and build a system or a society of some kind that makes it so that happens less, right? I think that'd be good, but it's you're never going to solve it. You're never going to get rid of it, and it stinks. My grandma is a perfect example of who Corey's talking about here. She died like 3 weeks ago. She was generous to a fault. She was hardworking. She was a Proverbs 31 woman. She was very, very active in the church for 30 years on her own as a widow. That was her life. Taking care of people, taking meals to people, driving people to their doctor's appointments. That's what she did. And she's dead. And as far as I'm concerned, that's it. I think that she found her life very fulfilling. And I know that she believed that she was going to go to heaven. So, I'm fine for her to believe that. But believing things doesn't make them true. I don't believe in manifesting. And just because you want something to be true doesn't mean it is. Or ever will be, or could be. Right? Ask any 7-year-old. They have no idea what's possible. But just because they really, really believe doesn't mean that they are correct. They are misguided in their beliefs, no matter how sincere they are. That's my position. I agree that this is the position I take. It doesn't matter. It's unfortunate. And you wish it did matter, but I don't think it does. Not sure what other unanswered questions you're getting at. We've gone the rounds at length privately on slavery, the lack of any foundation for morally on atheism, etc. And I've made videos specifically on those subjects. If there's some other question you think I haven't addressed, happy to do so. I will directly comment on this just to address it since it's a request. I don't think you have satisfactorily answered any of my questions about slavery. I don't believe you have a video about it on your channel. I would likely have watched it, or I have already watched it, if there is one. I don't remember that specifically, but I don't want to impugn your work. You know what? I can just get your channel pulled up right here. Okay, deconstructing, Narnia stuff, Nietzsche, that one I watched. Oh, I did watch this one, and I disagreed with your comments. I went over it, I pulled up texts, but the Bible explicitly condones chattel slavery, both in the Old Testament and more implicitly condones in the New Testament. Paul is not a good excuse here. Paul does not say you shouldn't have slaves anymore. He says if you're a slave, be a good slave. He says if you're a master, treat your slave well, which is good. Better than nothing, right? I'm not saying that that's bad advice, but the correct position to take, in my opinion, would be that you shouldn't own another human being as property. And that was how it worked. I mean, women were literally property. I don't know when that exactly changed, but I know that women were literally property for much of the history of the Hebrew people, the Israelites. But there are also verses that discuss foreign slaves. And foreign slaves can be passed down to your children as property. That's explicitly chattel slavery, right? I remember this video at least partially because you were talking about how it wasn't chattel slavery, it was different. But that's true if you're talking about among Israelites. You're not supposed to have a fellow Hebrew as a slave in perpetuity. But you could keep a foreigner as a slave and you could pass him down as an inheritance. So that you can say you don't like that verse, and that's fine. I agree. I don't think that's a good verse, but it's in there. It's part of the text. So you have to throw that out or say it was a different time, and for whatever reason, God didn't tell Christians that slavery was wrong until like the 1700s. Up till then, slavery was fine. He told them the rules on slavery, but he did not tell them not to do slavery, which he could have done. Right? Like, conceivably, if I am telling you to pick up your shoes, I could also tell you to pick up your room. And picking up your room would account for picking up your shoes as well. Right? It's one circle inside a bigger circle. And then both things that I want are accomplished. You could just say, don't have slaves. And then you don't have to worry about how people treat their slaves. But that's not how the Bible did it. And unless your argument is for incrementalism, God was gradually weaning people off the idea of having slaves. You can't get around that it is condoning having slaves. That you can't argue against that and be honest. So I would be interested to hear how you would deal with those verses specifically. If you listen, you're a smart guy. I am confident you are capable of looking those verses up for yourself. I will send you the verses I'm thinking of if you ask. But I'm not going to go redo that work. I think the video in which I respond to this is still on my channel. So you could watch that one where I do go through the verses. I feel like I'm being lazy by not doing that. And so I'm acknowledging that I feel like I should go get those sources. But Corey doesn't ever really show any sources. And so I'm not going to either unless you ask me for them specifically. Otherwise, you can take my word for it that they are in the Bible and I have read them on stream. The lack of any foundation for morality on atheism. I will also make the observation here for the first time that I am not an atheist. I'm an agnostic. Corey tends to not believe that there is any differentiation between the two, but I do. And I would like to imagine that my agnosticism is slightly more nuanced than the sort of modern atheism that is very anti-church, right? Just like, you believe in a sky daddy. I don't find that to be a very interesting way to talk about things. It's very reductive. It's like intentionally provocative, like trying to provoke a reaction. And I think that there are a lot of reasons people believe in God, gods, spirits, the supernatural, whatever, right? Whatever version of religion or the supernatural you believe in. There are a lot of reasons people believe in that stuff. And for some people, it really leads them to be just thoughtful, kind people who are living the best they can for whatever they believe, and the way they think they can do that best is by being kind and helping people. And I'm all for that, and it gives you purpose, and that's great. I don't think there's anything behind it, but it's not necessarily my job to tell you that you're dumb or wrong. If you ask me my thoughts, I will probably be honest with you. But I don't see it as my mission to deconvert people. But if people are asking serious questions, I want to encourage them to ask serious questions. I have serious questions that have not sufficiently been answered to this point by anybody. No matter how good the apologist is, maybe it's my arrogance and pride and not being willing to listen to somebody smarter than me. But there are a lot of people that I think are smarter than me, who I do listen to. I think Bart Ehrman is smarter than almost everybody I've met in my whole life, right? Probably in terms of academic achievement ability, he is elite in that sense. And I was a middling student in college. So there are plenty of people that are smarter than me, but there has not been an argument made by an apologist to this point that answers the specific questions I have about what we can trust, how we can trust it, and how we reconcile the awful things that are in there with the version of Christianity that we would like to believe the Bible is about from modern times. I have not had answers that compel me, right? I like to think I would listen to them, but I can poke holes in pretty much everything. It has been my gift since I was a small child. I'm good at poking holes in things. And I just think that there are some very easy holes to poke that are difficult to cover once done. So, if you... I am not a debate pervert. I'm not interested in a debate. I would be interested in having a conversation. Does not have to be recorded. It can be if you want. I understand you are a man with children, so your time is limited. I don't know that you would value a conversation where we can actually speak on things. I don't know if that's something that you would think is worth your time. My time is abundant, so I'm certainly happy to do it. And I think it would be interesting to get to bring up some of these points directly and see what your thoughts are, because I haven't heard them on many of my points. But I am perfectly understanding that may not be a time commitment you want to allot. because I expect it would be a longish and wide-ranging conversation. Again, if you want to make content, then we can make content, but I'm not interested in a sort of formal debate scoring points type deal. I am far more interested in getting to the point of an argument and explaining why you take a specific position in contrast to the evidence, right? I'm interested in that because you have to. Fuck it. I'm going to pull up the verse. Okay. Praise be to the God of Shem, make Canaan be a slave. I mean, this is different. This is not what I was talking about, but a lot of talk about slaves. Sarah had an Egyptian slave that she just told Abram to get pregnant as a surrogate. And was that consensual? It doesn't sound consensual, right? Now, this is in the ancient Bible times. This is in the misty mists of imagined history. But as I read the story, it says that Sarah had a slave and she told Abram at the time, to get her pregnant. And I don't believe the slave's opinion was taken into consideration. Maybe it was. It wasn't in the text. It just says Abram agreed with her, took her Egyptian slave, and gave her to her husband to be his wife. But again, if you are married without any agency, what's the difference? So anyway, that's in Genesis. Slave. More. I mean, listen. Slaves were in the water back then. But this is not what I'm looking for. Not Exodus. Okay, Exodus 20 verse 2. Well, let's look at the chapter. This is the NIV. Some people do not like the NIV. It's very easy to read. It's not necessarily the most faithful translation of the text. So let's look for the New Revised. I believe this is I don't think it's this specific version, but I believe Bart Ehrman was on the board or the research committee for the New Revised Standard Version. Okay, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of slavery. These are the 10 Commandments. You shall not make for yourself an idol. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal, etc., etc. What the fuck? Oh, it's 21. That's why I was like, this doesn't at all seem like what I was looking at. Okay, Hebrew servants. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he's to serve you for 6 years, and in the 7th year he can go free. If his master gives him a wife, then... Okay, so I was thinking about bringing this up, but since I wasn't going to go to the text, I wasn't going to, but now I am. Okay, so you can have a Hebrew slave, but only for 6 years. If he's married when he comes to work for you, then he keeps his wife when he quits. If he's not married, then he leaves single. You can give him a wife while he works for you. But if he wants to keep that wife, he can't leave. Maybe it's only if she has kids. But if the master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if he says, I love my master, also I like my wife and my kids, and I don't want to go free, then you can... This is actually the word, I think it's the word Elohim. It actually means the gods. So you can take him before like the idols and make a commitment in front of the idols. But then you can pierce his ear, and then he's your slave forever. If a man sells his daughter as a servant, she is not free to go, as male servants do. If she does not please the master who has selected her for himself, he must let her be redeemed. I assume this is sexual, but it could also be just like she's not doing the chores, she's not cooking. He must let her be redeemed. He has no right to sell her to foreigners because he has broken faith with her. So you can't buy and then resell. If he selects her for his son, he must grant her the rights of a daughter. If he marries another woman, so this passage, I don't know what the Hebrew is, all right? I'm not going to get crazy into the weeds here, but if a man sells his daughter as a servant, she's not free to go. If he marries another woman, he must not deprive the first one of her food, clothing, and marital rights. So she is his wife at property. And if he marries again, which is allowed, bigamy is allowed if you're a man, then you still have to feed her and like have sex with her. If you don't do those things, then she's free. Then you have given her up as a slave. Anyone who attacks their father or mother is to be put to death. That's not the same as what we're talking about. Anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. So, like, should we still keep these rules? Anyone who beats their male or female slaves with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result, but they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. Right, again, I keep coming back to this property stuff. If a bull gores a man or a woman, then the bull is to be killed, but the owner won't be responsible. If the bull has had the habit of goring and it kills a man or woman, then the owner is to be put to death. If you're irresponsible with your killer bull, then you will also get killed. However, if payment is demanded, the owner may redeem his life, so you can pay a fine if the people are willing to accept it. If it gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 of shekels of silver to the master of the slave because you have damaged their property. And the bull is to be stoned to death. Let's keep looking here. Oh, if you knock out the tooth of a male or a female slave, you have to let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. That's like not a great rule, but I guess it's better than nothing. Let's see. Leviticus. So Leviticus 22. It's good that I read fast because I can scan. Let's see, 21, rules for the priests. Priests can't shave their heads. They can't marry prostitutes. The high priest can't let his hair get messy. He must marry a virgin. That's a good rule if you are writing it as the high priest. No descendants who have a defect may come near to offer the food. So no disabled people. No one with a crippled hand or foot, or a hunchback, or who has festering sores, or who has bad eyes, or damaged testicles. I don't know, I guess you're checking testicles at the door. That's nothing about slavery, really. Here we go. Defiling skin disease, sacred offerings. Keep my commandments, yeah. Festival of Tabernacles. What? 2539. Okay, 25. Count off the Sabbath, the Jubilees. There's no evidence that this ever happened, but it's a nice idea. The idea of the year of the Jubilee. The land must not be sold permanently because the land belongs to me. This is like pawning stuff. But the year of Jubilee means that you get back the stuff you pawned, even if you could never pay to get it back. If any of your Israelites become poor, help them as you would a foreigner and stranger, so they can continue to live among you. It used to be illegal for Christians to lend money at interest, right? It is illegal for Muslims to lend money at interest because of this sort of thing. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. So, that was the verse I was looking for. You can argue against that verse. You can make whatever argument you want, and I will probably agree, as I have said earlier, that's a bad verse. I think that slavery is bad, and I think that it's bad that it is very explicit that you are allowed to have slaves, and this is where they can come from. You can't have a fellow American as a slave, but if you import them, it's fine. And you can import them for your wife as well. You can have wives that are slaves. And, you know, do we want to talk about how feminist that is? I know we were talking about feminism earlier. Is that feminist? Is that because of the Me Too movement? Anyway, this is where I stand on these things, and I think that's enough. That is the entirety of these comments. I will likely timestamp the video where I start talking about them and share that with Corey rather than typing out a very long response here. And Corey, if you do watch this, I apologize for my long-windedness. I want to make my points very, very clear. So I do reiterate, and I do take my time. So if you watch it, congratulations for your dedication. You should be proud of yourself. I've tried to be thoughtful in my response. I've tried to be respectful. I've tried to qualify why I say things that may sound dismissive or reductive. Hopefully that has been sufficient. I still have questions that have not been addressed, and I am interested to hear how you would address them, whether that's privately or whether that's making content. I would leave that up to you. Otherwise, hopefully I have been fairly clear and laid out my thoughts with some sort of evidence behind them. Try not to wave my hands and just speculate wildly or appeal to authority without actually, looking it up. But I am going to call it for the day. So, thanks for hanging out. Hopefully I've said something that provoked a thought or clarified something in your brain. That would make this sufficient, I think, as a use of my time. And we'll get back to it on the next installment.